The gunshot that echoed through the theater silenced the crowd, but it was the cruel laughter that followed which shattered Penelope Adams' dreams forever. The year was 1876, and the small mining town of Redding, California, had never witnessed such a deliberate act of sabotage against one of their own. Penelope stood frozen on the makeshift stage, her voice caught in her throat as smoke curled from the barrel of wealthy mine owner Harold Thornton's pistol. The bullet had torn through her carefully painted backdrop, a scene depicting the San Francisco Opera House she'd dreamed of performing in since childhood. "That's enough of this nonsense," Harold announced to the stunned audience, his voice carrying authority that came with being the town's primary employer. "This theater will be demolished next week. Redding doesn't need fairy tales and songbirds. It needs practical establishments." At 22, Penelope had spent years saving every penny from working at her father's general store to rent this abandoned warehouse. For 3 months, she transformed it into a small theater, teaching local children about Shakespeare and opera, bringing culture to a town that rarely experienced anything beyond work and survival. "Mr. Thornton, please." Penelope's voice trembled as she stepped forward, her pale blue dress her finest catching the lantern light. "The children have worked so hard. The community supports what we're doing here." Harold's eyes narrowed. "My mind is made up, Miss Adams. I've purchased this property. Your little experiment is over." He turned to the town council members seated in the front row, men who had initially encouraged her endeavor. "Gentlemen, I trust you'll explain the economic benefits of my new mining equipment storage facility to anyone who questions this decision." The councilmen nodded solemnly, avoiding Penelope's desperate gaze. These were the same men who had praised her initiative just weeks ago, who had promised support and protection for the arts in Redding. Now, they wouldn't even look her in the eye. As the crowd dispersed, murmuring in disappointment but unwilling to challenge Thornton, Penelope felt her knees weaken. 3 years of dreaming, months of backbreaking work, all destroyed with a single gunshot and the betrayal of those who should have defended her. "Miss Adams," a deep voice called from the back of the emptying room. She looked up to see a tall figure standing in the shadows. Isaac Young stepped forward, his weathered Stetson in his hands. At 28, Isaac was known throughout the region as a skilled horse trainer and occasional bounty hunter. His presence in town was sporadic. He'd arrive with wild horses to sell, stay a few weeks breaking them, then disappear again into the mountains. "I'm sorry for what happened," he said simply. Penelope straightened her shoulders, determined not to cry in front of this man she barely knew. "Thank you, Mr. Young, but unless you can convince the town council to find their backbones, your sympathy doesn't help much." A slight smile touched his lips. "Maybe not, but this might." He extended a folded paper toward her. "My ranch is 15 miles north of here. It's not much, but there's an old barn that's solid, high ceilings, good acoustics." Penelope took the paper, unfolding it to find a crude map. "You're offering me your barn. For what?" "For your theater." His hazel eyes held a steadiness that contrasted with his rugged appearance. "Thornton doesn't own everything in this territory, Miss Adams. Not yet, anyway. Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Isaac resettled his hat, the brim casting a shadow over his face. "I know enough. I know talent when I hear it, and I heard you singing when I passed by last week. Besides," he added, his voice lowering, "someone needs to stand against Thornton before this town becomes nothing but a hole in the ground." Before she could respond, Isaac nodded once and walked out, leaving Penelope clutching the map with trembling fingers. The next morning, Penelope stood in her father's general store, arranging canned goods while explaining the previous night's disaster. "It's over, Papa," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Everything I've worked for gone in an instant." Michael Adams, his once dark hair now streaked with silver, placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Nothing is ever truly over while you still draw breath, Penny. The council betrayed me. They promised to support the theater, then sat silent when Thornton destroyed it. The pain of betrayal cut deeper than the loss of the venue itself. Men like Thornton hold power through fear and money," her father said, "but their kind of power is a fragile thing when faced with true determination." Penelope remembered the map Isaac had given her. "Mr. Young offered his barn for performances, but it's so far from town. Who would travel all that way? The same people who filled your theater despite Thornton's disapproval." Michael smiled knowingly. "This town is hungry for more than just gold and survival, Penny. You've shown them something beautiful, and they won't forget it easily." The bell above the door jangled, and both turned to see Isaac enter, his tall frame filling the doorway. He nodded respectfully to Michael before addressing Penelope. "Miss Adams, I wanted to ensure you were considering my offer." Penelope retrieved the map from her pocket. "It's very generous, Mr. Young, but impractical. The distance alone can be managed," Isaac interrupted. "I've spoken with Hector Mendez. He's willing to use his wagon to transport anyone who wishes to attend but lacks transportation. For a small fee, of course." Michael stepped forward, extending his hand to Isaac. "That's resourceful thinking, Young. I've only seen you in passing before, but I appreciate you helping my daughter." As the men shook hands, Penelope studied Isaac more carefully. His face was tanned from years in the sun, a small scar running along his jawline. His clothes were practical but clean denim pants, a cotton shirt, leather vest. Nothing like the flashy attire some cowboys favored when coming to town. "Why are you really doing this?" Penelope asked directly. Isaac met her gaze without hesitation. "My mother was a singer in Boston before she followed my father west. She tried to bring music to every mining camp and settlement we lived in. Some places welcomed it, others." He shrugged. "I know what it's like to see something beautiful crushed by those too small-minded to value it." Something in his tone made Penelope believe him. "The children will be heartbroken about the theater if we could give them somewhere else to perform." "Then let's do it," Isaac said simply. "I'll come by tomorrow with my wagon. We can transport whatever supplies you need to salvage from the old theater." "Thornton will be furious," Penelope warned. A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. "I'm counting on it, Miss Adams." 2 days later, Penelope stood in the center of Isaac's barn, amazed by its potential. The structure was larger than she'd expected, with high, open rafters and surprisingly good acoustics. Morning light streamed through the large doors and several windows, illuminating the space. "This is remarkable," she admitted, turning in a slow circle. "With some cleaning and arrangement, this could actually work." Isaac leaned against one of the sturdy support posts. "The horses won't mind sharing for a good cause. There's plenty of room to keep them separated from your performance area." Penelope's mind was already racing with possibilities. "We'll need benches, a curtain for the stage area, perhaps some additional lanterns for evening performances." "I can build whatever you need," Isaac offered. "And there's a piano at the Jenkins place that hasn't been played in years." The widow mentioned selling it just last month. Penelope's eyes widened. "A piano? Out here?" Mr. Jenkins was particular about bringing civilization with them when they settled. "I suspect Mrs. Jenkins would sell it for a reasonable price, especially if she knew it would be used for performances." For the first time since Thornton's bullet had torn through her backdrop, Penelope felt a surge of hope. "I should speak with the children and their parents." See if they're willing to travel this distance for rehearsals. Use my wagon whenever you need it, Isaac said. I can teach you to handle the team if you'd like. Penelope regarded him with newfound appreciation. You're being extraordinarily generous, Mr. Young. I'm not sure I understand why. Isaac pushed away from the post, walking toward the barn doors. Let's just say I've spent too much of my life watching bullies win. It's time someone stood their ground. He paused, looking back at her. And please call me Isaac. The following weeks transformed Isaac's barn into a rustic but functional theater. Word spread through Reading about Penelope's new venue, carried by the children who eagerly returned to their drama lessons. Isaac proved himself surprisingly skilled at carpentry, constructing a raised platform stage and simple bench seating. Mrs. Jenkins indeed sold them her piano for a fraction of its worth, pleased it would bring music back to the community. The instrument required some repair and tuning, but its presence elevated the humble barn theater to something truly special. Penelope was directing a rehearsal one afternoon when a commotion outside interrupted them. She stepped to the barn door to find Harold Thornton dismounting from an expensive chestnut gelding, two of his mining foremen flanking him. "So this is where you've relocated your folly," Thornton called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Quite a downgrade from your warehouse, Miss Adams." Penelope stepped outside, conscious of the children watching from the doorway behind her. "Mr. Thornton, this is private property." "Indeed it is," Thornton agreed, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Young's property, as I understand it." "I'm surprised he's allowing such frivolity to distract from honest work." "The theater doesn't interfere with anyone's work," Penelope said firmly. "In fact, many of your miners' children are among my students. They're learning valuable skills." Thornton scoffed. "Skills? What use are Shakespeare and opera in a mining town? You're filling their heads with nonsense and false hopes. Is that why you're here, to lecture me on appropriate education?" Penelope felt her anger rising but kept her voice level, aware of her young audience. "I'm here to make you an offer," Thornton said, lowering his voice as he stepped closer. "Abandon this foolishness, and I'll find you a position as a teacher in the company school. Reading, writing, arithmetic, practical subjects for practical lives." Penelope was momentarily stunned by the offer. A teaching position would provide steady income, something her theater might never achieve, but the conditions were clear. She would have to surrender her dream. "Mr. Thornton, I appreciate, she's not interested." Isaac's voice cut through their conversation as he approached from the corral, a coiled rope in his hand. "Miss Adams has my full support in her endeavors here." Thornton turned, his expression hardening. "Young, I should have known you'd be involved in this defiance." "Still can't resist playing the hero, can you?" Isaac stopped beside Penelope, his stance casual but alert. "No heroics necessary, just providing space for something worthwhile." "You're making a mistake," Thornton warned, looking between them. "Both of you. I've invested heavily in Reading's future. Those who work against progress will find themselves left behind." "Is that a threat?" Isaac asked quietly. Thornton adjusted his expensive jacket. "Merely an observation. Good day, Miss Adams. Consider my offer before you waste any more of these children's time." With that, he remounted his horse and departed, his men following. "That man does know how to make an exit," Isaac remarked dryly. Penelope released a shaky breath. "He offered me a teaching position." Isaac studied her face. "Are you considering it?" "For about half a second," she admitted. "Steady pay would be nice, but at what cost?" A small smile played at Isaac's lips. "The cost would be too high. I've seen you teaching these kids. What you're giving them isn't just songs and stories, it's possibility." Before Penelope could respond, a small voice called from the barn. "Miss Adams, Are we continuing the rehearsal? Penelope turned to see 8-year-old Emily Wilson standing in the doorway, script clutched in her hands. Yes, Emily, we certainly are. She glanced back at Isaac. Will you stay? We could use an audience for this scene. Something warm flickered in Isaac's eyes. I'd be honored. That evening, after the children had departed with their parents, Penelope remained at the piano, quietly playing through a piece she'd been teaching the older students. The melody filled the barn with a gentle melancholy that matched her pensive mood. Isaac entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might need this. It's getting chilly. Penelope accepted the cup gratefully. Thank you, for the coffee and for standing with me against Thornton. Men like him understand only one thing, that there are lines they can't cross, Isaac said, sitting on a nearby bench. Penelope took a sip of the strong coffee, appreciating its warmth. He'll retaliate, you know. He's not one to accept defeat gracefully. I'm counting on it, Isaac replied, echoing his earlier sentiment. You seem almost eager for conflict with him. Why? Isaac was quiet for a moment, staring into his cup. 3 years ago, Thornton's mining operation diverted the creek that ran through my family's original homestead. The water my father had used to irrigate our crops suddenly disappeared. When my father confronted Thornton about it, he was offered a pittance for the land. What happened? Penelope asked softly. My father refused. A week later, our barn burned down, with our harvest inside. Isaac's voice remained steady, but Penelope could hear the controlled anger beneath it. The fire marshal called it an accident. My father died that winter, pneumonia, they said, but it was really a broken heart. He'd lost everything he'd worked for. I'm so sorry, Penelope whispered. I managed to save enough to buy this place higher ground, different water source, but I haven't forgotten. Isaac finally looked up at her. So when I see someone else standing up to him, yes, I'm eager to help. Penelope reached across and briefly touched his hand. We make quite a pair, don't we? Both nursing grievances against the great Harold Thornton. The difference is you're building something, I've just been. Isaac hesitated. Waiting, I suppose. For what? I didn't know until I saw you on that stage, refusing to back down. A genuine smile softened his features. Sometimes you need to see someone else's courage to find your own. The moment between them stretched, something unspoken passing in the lantern light. Finally, Penelope returned to the piano, her fingers finding a more hopeful melody. The children want to perform next Saturday, she said. Do you think we'll be ready? Isaac leaned back, watching her hands move across the keys. With you leading them, I have no doubt. The next week passed in a flurry of activity. Word of the upcoming performance spread throughout Reading and neighboring settlements. Isaac worked tirelessly, constructing additional seating and improving the barn's interior. Penelope focused on rehearsals, amazed at how quickly the children adapted to their new venue. When Saturday arrived, Penelope watched from behind her makeshift curtain as wagons and riders approached from all directions. The barn filled with families, miners, and even a few of the town council members who had betrayed her, now seemingly eager to show their support away from Thornton's direct influence. Quite a turnout, Isaac commented, joining her at the curtain's edge. Hector says he made 3 trips from town. Penelope's stomach fluttered with nerves. What if they hate it? What if they think it wasn't worth the journey? They won't, Isaac assured her. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. I have something for you, for luck. He pressed a small object into her palm, a delicately carved wooden rose, small enough to fit in her hand but detailed enough to show remarkable craftsmanship. Did you make this? She asked, running a finger over the smooth petals. During the evenings. I'm not much for sitting idle. A touch of color appeared on his tan cheeks. My mother always said performers need tokens of appreciation. Penelope closed her fingers around the carving, deeply touched by the gesture. "Thank you. I'll keep it with me." The performance exceeded all expectations. The children, energized by the large audience, performed their scenes with enthusiasm and surprising skill. When Penelope took the stage to sing the finale, the barn fell silent, captivated by her clear soprano voice carrying an old folk ballad about hope and perseverance. As the final note faded, there was a moment of breathless silence before the audience erupted in applause. Penelope bowed, tears pricking at her eyes as she gestured for the children to join her. Together they accepted the community's approval, validation of everything she'd fought for. Later, as the last families departed, Penelope stood in the yard under a sky brilliant with stars, still clutching Isaac's wooden rose. "You did it," Isaac said, approaching with a lantern. "They loved every minute." "We did it," she corrected him. "None of this would exist without you. I just provided the space. The magic was all yours." Penelope studied his face in the lantern light. "Why did you really help me, Isaac? And please don't say it was just to spite Thornton." Isaac set the lantern down on a nearby stump, considering his words carefully. "When I first heard you singing in that warehouse, it reminded me that beauty can exist even in the harshest places. When Thornton destroyed that, I couldn't stand by and watch." "Is that all?" Penelope pressed gently. His eyes met hers. "No, but the rest is complicated." "I'm good with complicated," she said, stepping closer. Isaac drew a deep breath. "I've spent 3 years focused on survival and vendetta. I forgot there were other things worth fighting for. You reminded me. And now I find myself thinking beyond tomorrow for the first time in years." His voice lowered. "Because of you." The confession hung in the air between them, more significant than either had anticipated. Penelope felt her heart quicken, surprised by how natural it felt to be standing here with him, discussing futures neither had imagined weeks ago. "I should get back to town," she said reluctantly. "My father will be waiting." Isaac nodded. "I'll hitch the wagon." As they rode toward Reading under the starlit sky, Penelope held the wooden rose in her lap, feeling as though something fundamental had shifted in her world. Her dream, once crushed by betrayal, was taking new form different than she'd imagined, but perhaps more meaningful for having been reborn through adversity. And sitting beside her was a man who had helped make it possible, whose own pain had somehow aligned with hers to create something unexpected and full of promise. The success of the first performance led to a regular schedule of productions at what the locals began calling Adams Barn Theater. Each weekend brought larger crowds, with families traveling from as far as 20 miles away. The children's confidence blossomed under Penelope's guidance, and adults began approaching her about participating in future shows. Harold Thornton, true to form, didn't accept the theater's success graciously. When direct intimidation failed, he resorted to more subtle tactics. The price of supplies at stores he controlled suddenly increased for Penelope and Isaac. Mysterious obstacles appeared in the road leading to Isaac's ranch on performance days. Anonymous letters circulated questioning the propriety of young children spending time at a bachelor's remote property. Despite these challenges, the theater continued to thrive. Penelope expanded her repertoire, teaching music lessons during the week and organizing larger productions for the monthly performances. Isaac found himself increasingly involved, not just with building sets and managing the space, but occasionally even taking small roles when male parts were needed. Their collaboration gradually deepened into friendship, and then something more. Their shared purpose created a bond that strengthened with each passing week. Penelope found herself lingering at the ranch after rehearsals, discussing books and music with Isaac over simple meals. He, in turn, began making more frequent trips to town, ostensibly to purchase supplies but inevitably ending up at the Adams General Store. On a crisp autumn evening, nearly 3 months after the theater's relocation, Penelope was organizing sheet music when Isaac entered the barn, holding a letter. "Mail came through," he said, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "There's something for you." Penelope accepted the envelope, surprised to see the San Francisco Opera House letterhead. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the paper. "It's from the director," she whispered. "They're responding to my letter from last spring." Isaac leaned against the piano. "The one about apprenticing with them," Penelope nodded, scanning the contents. Her face registered shock, then wonder. "They're offering me an audition. Next month." She looked up at Isaac, eyes wide. "They heard about our performances here, apparently Mrs. Jenkins' nephew is a patron of the arts in San Francisco. He wrote to them about what we've accomplished." "That's wonderful," Isaac said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "It's what you've always wanted." "Yes," Penelope agreed, though her joy was tempered by the realization of what it might mean. "San Francisco, it's so far." 200 miles, Isaac confirmed, but reachable by train now. An awkward silence fell between them, both aware of the implications. Penelope had never hidden her dream of performing in a real opera house, but in recent weeks, that dream had subtly shifted, expanded to include the community she'd built and the man standing before her. "I don't have to go," she said finally. Isaac shook his head firmly. "Of course you do. This is your chance, Penelope, the dream you fought for. But the theater here, the children, will be fine for a few weeks while you're gone." Isaac straightened, his decision made. "And if they offer you a position, well, we'll figure that out then." Penelope studied his face. "We." A flush crept up his neck. "I just mean, you shouldn't make hasty decisions, either way." Before she could respond, the barn door opened again, admitting Michael Adams. He carried a small crate of supplies which he set down near the door. "Evening, Isaac Penny. Thought you might need these paints for the new backdrop." He noticed the letter in Penelope's hand. "What's that you've got?" Penelope shared the news, watching her father's face light up with pride. "San Francisco. My word, that's wonderful news." He embraced her warmly. "Your mother would have been so proud." "I haven't decided yet, Papa," Penelope cautioned. "There's a lot to consider." Michael glanced between his daughter and Isaac, a knowing look in his eye. "Indeed there is, but an audition is just that, a chance to be heard. The decisions come later." He clapped Isaac on the shoulder. "Dinner at our place tonight. Sarah Wilkins brought over a venison roast that's too big for just me and Penny." Isaac hesitated only briefly. "I'd be honored, sir." As they prepared to leave, Isaac hung back to extinguish the lanterns. Penelope found herself lingering, the letter still clutched in her hand. "Isaac," she began, uncertain how to express the tumult of her feelings. "If I go to San Francisco—" He turned to face her, his expression carefully composed. "You should go, at least for the audition." "And if they offer me a position," Isaac took a step closer, "then you'll have a choice to make. Would you?" Penelope hesitated. "Would you ask me to stay?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken emotion. Isaac reached out, gently taking the letter from her hand and folding it carefully. "I would never ask you to give up your dream," he said softly. "But I would ask you to consider that dreams can change. They can grow to include things we never imagined." Their eyes met in the dimming light, and for a moment Penelope thought he might kiss her. Instead, he placed the folded letter back in her hand, his fingers lingering against hers. "Your father's waiting," he said, "and that venison won't eat itself." The weeks leading to Penelope's San Francisco journey passed in a flurry of activity. The theater prepared a special performance as a send-off, with the children presenting scenes from various shows they'd staged over the months. The community contributed to a collection to help with her travel expenses, a gesture that moved Penelope to tears. Isaac withdrew somewhat, throwing himself into ranch work and speaking less during their interactions. Penelope noticed his reticence, but was unsure how to breach the growing distance between them. Both seemed to be protecting themselves against the possibility of an extended separation. 2 days before her departure, Penelope arrived at the ranch for a final rehearsal to find Isaac working with a magnificent black stallion in the corral. She watched from the fence as he moved in perfect harmony with the powerful animal, his quiet confidence evident in every gesture. "He's beautiful," she called when Isaac noticed her presence. Isaac guided the horse toward her. "This is Midnight. Been working with him for almost a year now." The stallion snorted softly as Penelope reached out to stroke his nose. "He seems to trust you completely." "Trust is earned, not given," Isaac replied, patting the horse's neck, "especially with the wild ones." The metaphor wasn't lost on Penelope. "Is that what I am, a wild one?" Isaac's eyes met hers over the horse's back. "You're someone with places to go and things to achieve." "I've always known that. And you?" she challenged gently. "What are you, Isaac Young?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "A man who's learning that revenge is a poor substitute for purpose." Penelope circled the corral until she stood directly before him, only the fence between them. "And have you found a purpose?" "I'm beginning to," he admitted, "but it's complicated by certain factors. Such as the possibility that what I want might not align with what's best for others I care about." Penelope reached across the fence, touching his arm. "Perhaps you should let those others decide what's best for them." Isaac covered her hand with his own. "Perhaps." He seemed about to say more when shouts from the road interrupted them. They turned to see a wagon approaching rapidly, driven by one of the young miners who frequently attended their performances. He pulled up in a cloud of dust, his face flushed with urgency. "Miss Adams, Mr. Young, you've got to come quick." "What's happened?" Isaac demanded, immediately alert. "It's the theater," the young man panted. "There's been a fire. It's still burning." Penelope felt the blood drain from her face. "The children. No performances today, no one was inside, but it's bad, real bad." Isaac was already opening the corral gate, leading Midnight out. "Penelope, take my wagon. I'll ride ahead." The journey back to the barn was a blur of fear and dread. When they finally arrived, Penelope's worst fears were confirmed. The beautiful theater they'd created was engulfed in flames, the roof already collapsed in sections. A chain of townspeople passed buckets of water, trying valiantly to control the blaze, but it was clear the structure couldn't be saved. Isaac stood at the edge of the chaos, his face set in grim lines as he conferred with the men fighting the fire. When he saw Penelope approach, he moved quickly to intercept her. "Don't get too close," he warned, taking her arm. "The heat's intense." "How?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How did this happen?" Before Isaac could answer, Sheriff Collins approached them, his expression grave. "Young Miss Adams, I'm sorry about your place." "Was it an accident?" Penelope asked, already suspecting the answer. The sheriff removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "Got 3 witnesses saw riders leaving just before the flames were spotted. Can't say for certain yet, but—" "Thornton," Isaac growled. "This has his signature all over it." "That's a serious accusation," the sheriff cautioned. "Without proof, look around you." Isaac's voice rose. "Who else would benefit from destroying this place? Who's been trying to shut us down from the beginning?" Several of the firefighters had stopped to listen, murmurs of agreement rippling through the crowd. Penelope realized with sudden clarity that the situation could quickly escalate beyond control. "Sheriff," she said firmly. "We're not making formal accusations. But I trust you'll investigate thoroughly." The sheriff nodded, relieved by her measured response. "You have my word, Miss Adams." As the sheriff moved away, Penelope turned to Isaac, placing a restraining hand on his arm. "Violence won't solve this." "Neither will turning the other cheek," he replied, his jaw tight with anger. "This isn't just about the theater anymore. He could have killed someone." "I know," Penelope acknowledged, "but rushing off half-cocked will only make things worse." Isaac stared at the burning structure, watching years of his family's history reduced to ash alongside their shared dream. "What about San Francisco?" he asked suddenly. "You're supposed to leave in 2 days." The audition had completely fled Penelope's mind in the face of the disaster. "I can't possibly go now, not with everything in ruins." "You must," Isaac insisted, turning to face her, "now more than ever." "Why?" "Because if you stay, he wins. Completely." Isaac's eyes reflected the dancing flames. "At least in San Francisco, you'd have a chance to salvage part of your dream." Penelope shook her head firmly. "My dream has changed, Isaac. You were right about that. I won't run away when people I care about are in trouble." Their conversation was interrupted by Michael Adams, who pushed through the crowd to reach them, his face streaked with soot. "Thank God you're both all right," he said, embracing his daughter. "I feared you might have been inside." "The barn is gone, Papa," Penelope said, her voice hollow. "Everything we built." Michael surveyed the destruction with a grim expression. "Buildings can be rebuilt. What matters is that no one was hurt." He turned to Isaac. "What will you do now, son?" Isaac's face hardened. "First, make sure everyone here is safe. Then have a conversation with Harold Thornton." "Not alone, you won't," Michael said firmly. "Half the town's ready to march on his office right now. This has gone beyond personal grievance. He's attacked something the community values." As if to confirm his words, several miners approached, led by the father of one of Penelope's young students. "Mr. Young, Miss Adams," the man said, removing his cap. "We've been talking. If you're planning to rebuild, we want to help. Most of us have experience with construction, and we're willing to donate time and materials." Penelope was touched by the offer, but Isaac responded before she could. "I appreciate that, but this property isn't safe anymore. Thornton has made that clear. Rebuilding here would just invite more trouble." "Then we'll find another location," the miner insisted. "My brother owns land on the other side of town. It's not as pretty as your place, but it's out of Thornton's direct influence." Others voiced their agreement, and Penelope realized with astonishment that the theater had become more than just her personal dream. It belonged to the community now, and they weren't willing to let it die. "What about your audition, Miss Adams?" someone called out. Penelope looked around at the concerned faces, then at Isaac, whose expression had become unreadable. "The audition can wait," she said firmly. "Some things are more important." As night fell and the fire finally burned itself out, leaving only smoldering ruins, Penelope sat with Isaac on a fallen log at the edge of his property. The townspeople had gradually departed, leaving promises of help and support in their wake. "You should reconsider San Francisco," Isaac said quietly. "The stagecoach leaves tomorrow. You could still make your audition." Penelope turned to him, frustrated by his continued insistence. "Why are you so determined to send me away? Do you want me gone that badly?" Isaac's head snapped up, surprise evident in his features. "God, no, that's not it at all." "Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you're pushing me away at every opportunity." Isaac was silent for a long moment, staring at the smoking remains of his barn. "I'm trying to do what's right," he finally said. "For you. Shouldn't I decide what's right for me? You don't understand what you'd be giving up," Isaac insisted. San Francisco, the opera, everything you've worked for. And you don't understand what I'd be giving up by leaving, Penelope countered. This community we've built, the children who depend on us. She paused, gathering her courage. You. The word hung between them, finally giving voice to the connection that had been growing over the past months. Isaac turned to her, his expression conflicted. Penelope, I have nothing to offer you except a burned-out ranch and a vendetta against the most powerful man in the county. That's not true, she said softly. You offered me support when everyone else abandoned me. You've given these children a chance to experience art and beauty. You've shown this community that standing together against bullies is possible. She reached for his hand. You've given me a new dream, Isaac, one I believe is worth fighting for. Isaac's fingers tightened around hers. I never meant for any of this to happen. The fire was not your fault, she interrupted firmly. Thornton is responsible for his own actions. But if you hadn't met me, then I'd be teaching arithmetic in Thornton's company school, my spirit slowly dying. Penelope shifted closer. I don't regret any of it, Isaac, not one moment. In the silvery moonlight, his face softened. Even now, with everything in ruins, especially now. Penelope squeezed his hand. This is when we discover what we're truly made of, both of us. Isaac studied her face, as if memorizing every detail. Then, with gentle deliberation, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft, tentative at first, then deepening as Penelope responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks, he admitted. What took you so long? She whispered, a smile playing at her lips. Fear, he answered honestly. Fear that I wasn't good enough for someone like you. Fear that I'd hold you back from the life you deserve. And now I'm still afraid, he said. But I'm more afraid of letting you go without telling you how I feel. Penelope drew back slightly to look into his eyes. And how do you feel, Isaac Young? Like I've been wandering in darkness for years, and you're the first light I've seen. His voice was low, intense. Like everything that happened, even the worst of it led me to you, and I can't regret any of it because of that. Tears pricked at Penelope's eyes. Then stop trying to send me away. Even if staying means giving up the opera house. Your chance at professional recognition. Even then, she confirmed. Because I've realized something important. I wanted to perform not just for the applause, but to move people, to bring beauty and emotion into their lives. She gestured toward the town, and I'm doing that right here. The venue doesn't matter as much as the purpose. Isaac raised a hand to her cheek. You're extraordinary, Penelope Adams. So are you, she replied. And together we're going to rebuild, better than before. The dawn brought new determination. Word had spread throughout the county about the fire, and by mid-morning, wagons began arriving at Isaac's property, loaded with lumber, tools, and willing workers. The sheriff appeared with news that an investigation was officially underway, though he cautioned that proving Thornton's involvement would be difficult. Penelope wrote a respectful letter to the San Francisco Opera House, explaining her circumstances and requesting a postponement of her audition. Isaac found them temporary shelter in a small cabin on the far edge of his property, originally built for ranch hands, but unused since he typically worked alone. 3 days after the fire, as plans for rebuilding were being discussed on the cleared ground where the barn had stood, a commotion at the road drew everyone's attention. Harold Thornton approached on horseback, flanked by 4 armed men. The workers fell silent, many reaching instinctively for tools that could double as weapons. Isaac stepped forward, positioning himself between Thornton and the others. You're not welcome here, Thornton, he called out. Thornton reined in his horse, surveying the scene with apparent amusement. Quite a gathering. Planning another theater, are we? What do you want? Isaac demanded, merely to observe the community spirit I've heard so much about. Thornton's smile was cold. Fascinating how people rally around lost causes. Penelope moved to stand beside Isaac. If you've come to gloat, Mr. Thornton, you're wasting your time. We're already rebuilding. Ah, Miss Adams, still here. I thought you'd be on your way to San Francisco by now. Thornton's gaze shifted between them knowingly. Unless something or someone has persuaded you to abandon your ambitions. My ambitions are intact, Penelope replied evenly. They've simply evolved to include this community. Thornton laughed. How noble and convenient given the ashes of your little project. He leaned forward in his saddle. But let me be clear, this isn't over. Reading is on the cusp of becoming an important industrial center. There's no place for dreamers and troublemakers in its future. Isaac took a step forward. Is that a threat? A prediction, Thornton corrected. One you'd be wise to heed, both of you. He straightened, addressing the gathered workers. That goes for all of you. Those who ally themselves against progress will find themselves left behind or worse. A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Michael Adams pushed forward, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by quiet intensity. You know, Thornton, I've run the general store in Reading for 15 years. I've extended credit to half the families here when times were tough. People remember kindness. He gestured around at the gathered crowd, just as they remember cruelty and intimidation. Your point, Adams. Thornton asked impatiently. My point is that fear only works until people stop being afraid. Look around you. Michael's voice carried clearly. Do these look like frightened people? Thornton surveyed the determined faces surrounding him, his confidence visibly wavering for the first time. You're making a mistake, he warned. All of you. The only mistake was letting you dictate the future of this community for so long, Isaac replied. That ends today. For a tense moment, it seemed Thornton might order his men to act. Instead, he jerked his horse's reins, turning the animal sharply. We'll see who's still standing when this is over, he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. With that, he spurred his horse and departed, his men following close behind. As the dust settled, Penelope released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That could have turned ugly. It still might, Isaac cautioned. He won't give up easily. One of the miners stepped forward. Neither will we, Mr. Young. There's strength in numbers, and Thornton just discovered he's outnumbered. A cheer of agreement rose from the gathered workers, and soon they returned to their tasks with renewed purpose. As the day progressed, the foundation for a new structure began to take shape larger and sturdier than the original barn. That evening, Penelope found Isaac sitting alone on the cabin's small porch, staring at the half-built framework illuminated by the setting sun. It's going to be beautiful, she said, settling beside him on the rough-hewn bench. It already is, he replied, not looking at the construction but at her. I never expected any of this, you know. When I offered you my barn, I thought it would be a simple arrangement. You'd use the space. I'd have the satisfaction of defying Thornton in some small way. And now I can't imagine my life without you in it. The admission came easily, naturally. Without the music and the children and everything you've brought here, Penelope leaned against his shoulder. I received a reply from San Francisco today. Isaac tensed slightly. Oh, they've offered to reschedule my audition for spring, and she hesitated. They've proposed something interesting. If we establish a proper theater here, they'd consider sending traveling performers occasionally, a sort of cultural outreach to smaller communities. Isaac turned to her in surprise. They'd do that, apparently, Mrs. Jenkins' nephew is more influential than we realized. He's convinced them that bringing culture to mining communities is a worthy endeavor. That would be. Isaac searched for the right word. Remarkable. It would mean creating something permanent, Penelope said carefully. Something that would require both of us, your practical skills and my artistic direction. A partnership, Isaac suggested. Yes. Penelope met his gaze steadily. In every sense of the word, understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes. Penelope Adams, are you proposing to me? A blush colored her cheeks. I'm suggesting that what we're building here together might be worth formalizing, in time. Isaac took her hand, his expression serious. There are still obstacles. Thornton won't disappear overnight. The new theater will require constant work and protection. I know. And I'm still just a rancher with modest means and a stubborn streak. A stubborn streak I happen to admire, Penelope countered. Along with your courage, your integrity, and your remarkably gentle hands. She smiled at his raised eyebrow. I've watched you with the horses and with the children. You have a gift for nurturing without controlling. Isaac brought her hand to his lips. If we do this, commit to each other and to this vision, there's no turning back. San Francisco would become just a place to visit, not a destination. I've made my choice, Penelope said simply. The question is, have you made yours? In answer, Isaac pulled her close, his kiss conveying everything words could not promise, passion, and the certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The months that followed brought both triumph and tribulation. The new theater rose steadily from the ashes of the old, larger and more ambitious than its predecessor. Word spread throughout the region about the community that had defied Harold Thornton, inspiring others to question his authority. The sheriff's investigation into the fire eventually uncovered evidence linking one of Thornton's foremen to the arson. While Thornton himself escaped direct implication, the scandal damaged his reputation and business interests. Several investors withdrew their support, and the town council, emboldened by changing public sentiment, began rejecting his more aggressive expansion proposals. By early spring, the new Reading Community Theater stood complete, a proud structure of solid timber with a proper stage, comfortable seating for over 100, and remarkably good acoustics. Its first production featured not only local talent, but also 2 performers from the San Francisco Opera, fulfilling the promise of cultural exchange. On opening night, Penelope stood backstage, watching through a gap in the curtain as the audience filed in. The excitement was palpable, with families dressed in their Sunday best, despite the muddy spring roads many had traveled to attend. Nervous? Isaac asked, appearing beside her in the formal suit he rarely wore. Terrified, she admitted. What if they've traveled all this way for disappointment? Isaac slipped an arm around her waist. Not possible. You've created something extraordinary here, Penelope. Everyone knows it. We created it, she corrected, leaning into his embrace. I couldn't have done this alone. Neither could I, he acknowledged. We make a good team. Penelope turned in his arms to face him. The best. Isaac studied her face, his expression growing serious. There's something I need to ask you before the curtain rises. Now, we're about to begin in 10 minutes. Now, he insisted gently. Because I want to ask while it's just us, before all the applause and celebration. Intrigued, Penelope nodded. All right. To her surprise, Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box hand-carved, she realized, with delicate rose patterns matching the wooden flower he'd given her months ago. I've been working on this for weeks, he said, a touch of nervousness in his voice. Wanted to get it just right. When he opened the box, Penelope gasped. Inside lay a ring not diamond but opal, set in silver with intricate engraving along the band. It's not traditional, Isaac said quickly, but neither are we. The opal reminded me of how you bring all these colors and emotions to life around you, and silver seemed right for a woman who finds value in things others might overlook. Tears welled in Penelope's eyes. It's perfect. Isaac took a deep breath. Penelope Adams, these past months have been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. You've helped me transform revenge into purpose, bitterness into hope. I can't imagine facing any future without you beside me. He held the ring between them. Will you marry me? Yes, she whispered without hesitation. Yes, with all my heart. As Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, a noise from the doorway startled them. They turned to find several of the children watching with wide eyes and barely suppressed excitement. Miss Adams is going to be Mrs. Young. 8-year-old Emily announced, clapping her hands in delight. Penelope laughed through her tears. It appears we have an audience after all. Get used to it, Isaac murmured, placing a quick kiss on her lips. In this theater, someone's always watching. News of their engagement spread through the crowded theater even before the performance began. When Penelope took the stage to welcome everyone, the audience erupted in cheers and well wishes, turning the evening into a dual celebration of artistic achievement and personal joy. The performance itself exceeded all expectations. The children, now experienced performers, carried their roles with confidence. The visiting opera singers brought professional polish that elevated the entire production. And when Penelope sang the finale, her clear voice filling the space she and Isaac had created together, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. After the final curtain call, as the audience mingled with performers in the warm spring evening, Michael Adams found the engaged couple standing slightly apart from the crowds. "Your mother would be so proud," he told Penelope, embracing her tightly. "Of everything you've accomplished and of the man you've chosen." He turned to Isaac, extending his hand. "Welcome to the family, son, though in truth, you've been part of it for some time now." "Thank you, sir," Isaac replied, the formality belying the emotion in his voice. "I'll do everything in my power to deserve her." "I know you will." Michael glanced toward the celebrating crowd. "You two have created something remarkable here, not just a theater, but a community that stands together." As if to illustrate his point, a commotion near the road drew their attention. A familiar figure on horseback approached Harold Thornton, alone this time, his once imperious bearing notably diminished. The crowd parted warily as he dismounted and walked toward the theater. Isaac instinctively moved in front of Penelope, but she placed a hand on his arm, stepping forward to stand beside him. "Mr. Thornton," she acknowledged with composed dignity, "this is unexpected." Thornton removed his hat, a gesture of respect none of them had witnessed before. "Miss Adams." "Mr. Young, I've come to offer my congratulations on your theater, and I'm told, on your engagement." The sincerity of his tone surprised them both. Isaac studied the man carefully, noting the subtle changes in his appearance, the slightly rumpled suit, the new lines around his eyes. "That's generous of you," Isaac replied cautiously. Thornton glanced around at the successful theater and the community gathered to support it. "I recognize defeat when I see it, Young. This past year has taught me that lesson, among others." "Defeat?" Penelope questioned. "I never saw this as a competition, Mr. Thornton." "Perhaps that's why you prevailed," Thornton acknowledged with unexpected humility. "My business interests are shifting eastward. I'll be leaving Reading by month's end." A murmur ran through the onlookers at this announcement. Thornton had been a fixture in the community for so long that his departure seemed almost unimaginable. "The mining operation?" Isaac asked. "Being sold to a consortium that includes several local investors, your father-in-law among them," Thornton added with a nod toward Michael Adams. "They have more." collaborative plans for its development. Penelope exchanged a surprised glance with Isaac. Her father had mentioned nothing about such an investment. Change comes to us all, it seems, Thornton continued, even to men who believed themselves immune to it. He extended his hand toward Isaac. No hard feelings, young. We both fought for what we believed in. You simply fought better. Isaac hesitated only briefly before accepting the handshake. No hard feelings, he confirmed, though his eyes remained watchful. Thornton turned to Penelope. Your talent deserves a wider audience, Miss Adams, but I've come to understand that worth isn't measured solely by how far one travels from home. Thank you, Penelope replied, genuinely touched by the unexpected olive branch. I hope you find what you're looking for, Mr. Thornton. With a final nod, Thornton replaced his hat and returned to his horse. The gathered community watched in collective astonishment as their longtime adversary departed without further drama. Well, Michael said into the ensuing silence, that was certainly theatrical. A ripple of laughter broke the tension, and soon the celebration resumed with even greater enthusiasm, now tinged with the sense that a significant chapter in Reading's history had closed. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the theater stood quiet under a canopy of stars, Isaac and Penelope walked hand in hand through the peaceful grounds. You believe him? Penelope asked. About leaving and selling the mine? Isaac considered the question carefully. I believe he recognizes that his power here has waned, whether that's prompted genuine reflection or merely strategic retreat. He shrugged. Time will tell. It's strange, Penelope mused. When he destroyed our first theater, I thought everything was lost. Now I can almost thank him for it. Isaac raised an eyebrow. Thank him. If he hadn't burned the barn, we might never have discovered how much this community was willing to fight for something beautiful. We might not have built something so much greater than we originally imagined. She lifted her hand, admiring how the opal ring caught the moonlight. And you might not have proposed tonight. Isaac laughed softly. Oh, I would have proposed eventually, though perhaps with less dramatic timing. They stopped at the edge of the property, looking back at the theater silhouetted against the night sky. From this distance, the building seemed to glow with the promise of all the stories yet to be told within its walls. What happens now? Penelope asked, leaning against Isaac's shoulder. Now. Isaac wrapped his arm around her waist. Now we continue what we've started. We build a life together. We bring music and stories to people who need them. We teach children that dreams are worth fighting for. And we live happily ever after, Penelope teased gently. Not without challenges, Isaac corrected, ever practical. But yes, happily, very happily indeed. As if to seal the promise, he turned her in his arms and kissed her beneath the vast western sky, where stars blazed like distant applause for the performance of their lives, one that was just beginning. 15 years later, the Reading Community Theater celebrated its anniversary with a special production featuring both professional actors from San Francisco and local talent. In the front row sat Isaac and Penelope Young, their 3 children beside them, 13-year-old Michael, 11-year-old Sarah, and 8-year-old James. The Young ranch had prospered over the years, expanding to include not only horses but also a respected breeding program. Isaac's reputation as a trainer had grown throughout California, bringing clients from as far as San Francisco and Los Angeles. Penelope had developed the theater into a cultural landmark, attracting regular tours from professional companies and nurturing generations of local talent. Twice yearly, she performed with the San Francisco Opera as a special guest, maintaining her connection to the professional arts world while remaining rooted in the community she loved. Reading itself had grown into a balanced blend of industry and culture. The mining consortium led by Michael Adams had implemented more sustainable practices, diversifying into lumber and agriculture as well. The town now boasted a proper school, a library, and a growing population of families attracted by its reputation for valuing both practical progress and artistic expression. As the curtain rose on a new production of Romeo and Juliet, featuring Emily Wilson, now 23, and recently returned from studying drama in New York, Penelope squeezed Isaac's hand. "Did you ever imagine this?" she whispered, indicating not just the beautiful theater but the thriving community it represented. Isaac smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening with genuine contentment. "Not until you taught me how to dream again." Their youngest son tugged impatiently at Penelope's sleeve. "Mama, when do I get to be in a play?" "Next season, James," she promised quietly. "When you're 9. Papa says I can already ride better than Michael could at 12, the boy persisted, earning an elbow from his older brother. "Different talents for different children," Isaac murmured diplomatically. "Now hush and watch the performance." As the familiar tragedy unfolded on stage, Penelope reflected on how differently her own story had turned out. Her dreams, once crushed by betrayal, had been transformed rather than destroyed. With Isaac as the wind beneath her wings, she had soared in ways she'd never anticipated, building not just a theater but a legacy of courage, community, and unwavering love. When the final curtain fell and applause filled the theater, Penelope looked around at the faces of her family and neighbors, all part of the beautiful life she and Isaac had created together. It wasn't the life she had once imagined for herself, but it was infinitely richer, deeper, and more meaningful than any dream she could have conceived alone. And in the end, that was the greatest performance of all.